got our chief speaker, our keynote speaker here. I've got other two speakers who are quite important, and thank you for coming on time. By yourself, you can sit around, you can twist your chair, everybody can face that you can see here, it's all right. When the food is served, then you can turn around and eat more comfortably. Thank you. And it is our 26th annual lecture. I think you have seen on our letter that previous speaker included Tony Benn, Joseph Stiglitz, Noam Chomsky last year, Tony Benn, Bailey Bhutto and many. And we are pleased that this year we have Ivan Lewis, who is our shadow Secretary of State for DFID. As you all know, that we are passing through austerity. In 2007, international recession came and everybody was frightened that how we are going to come out of it. The Labour Party decided to go for election. They went for election and they did win, but no party win here. I think we know there is a coalition government and they are going too hard on everybody to get the debt down. Everybody wanted that debt is down in the developing world and they should bring it down. But I think there are many things which we should work together. Education is one important issue. I think you all saw and heard last week that Gordon Brown, a few weeks back, went to Pakistan. Last week he was in Paris. I think this evening goes to Malala, who has bravely stood fast against all the reactionary forces and said that I want education. I think we owe this evening to Malala. So there was a meeting last week in Paris in which Gordon Brown went and he is leading the drive for education for all. I think we should work together to make that happen. I'm very pleased that you are all here and this message should go out. I'm very, very thankful to all media people, ARY, Geo, Nation, other OSAF, Kashmir Link, and everybody. I think UK Times and everybody who has come here. So the message, although this is a limited gathering, I'm hoping we will reach 80 to 90 people this evening. But I think the message will go to hundreds of thousands and millions. And I hope the message today is that we want a better, equal, peaceful, just world for all. Can I first of all invite, obviously I was going to ask Anna Sarwar to speak first, but can I invite a young emerging man who was there last year in Noam Chomsky's meeting, Ian Murray, who is the Shadow Minister for Business in the UK, to come and speak.
Thank you very much indeed, and thank you to your chairman, of course, Dave Anderson. I only know him as the Honourable Member for Blaydon, so you'll know him as Dave Anderson for inviting me along. I've got a lengthy speech to introduce Sarwar, who's just arrived, because I was supposed to make a very big entrance, and all the jokes about Anas I can probably now deliver on the basis that he has arrived. Now, when Anas Sarwar was made deputy leader, or elected deputy leader, I should say, of the Scottish Labour Party, we were all incredibly proud, and not just because I voted for him, and it's the only leader I voted for that's actually won so far, but he is the modern face of the Scottish Labour Party. He's driving through reforms, not just in terms of the party, but in terms of social justice, in terms of education that we've just heard about, and in terms of driving forward a really modern Scottish party. And he's doing that from Westminster, but he's also working hard on all those issues. And we're just about to hear from Anas, when he'll no doubt tell us all the wonderful work that he's doing both in Parliament and in Scotland. So I'm delighted that he's arrived. And of course, as well, we have Ivan Lewis, MP, the Shadow Secretary of State for the Department for International Development. When I first entered Parliament in 2010, I was fortunate enough to become Ivan's Parliamentary Private Secretary at the time when Ivan was at Culture, Media and Sport. So if you like my contribution this evening, I've learned everything that I know from Ivan. If you don't, then certainly Ivan's influenced my career hugely. And Ivan's a wonderful advocate for the Department of International Development. He's a super Shadow Secretary of State, and we'll hear from him in a few moments. I wanted just to say a few words. Firstly, about Third World solidarity. I when I first left university, went to spend some time in Nepal, and went out there for two reasons. One was to learn more about the country, but secondly was to build a school with some secondary schools I've been working with whilst at university. Because the power of that school that we built in Kathmandu to bring people from some of the poorest parts of the world into education and transform their lives. And I still keep in touch with one or two of the pupils that we helped at that time, and some of them have gone on to start their own businesses, some have gone on to travel the world, and others have gone on to influence others. And it's the power of that education across the world that's so important. I'm delighted that Gordon Brown is taking forward some of those issues throughout the United Nations. But one thing that always struck me when I was in Nepal was that poverty was really the root of all evil. And many of the people that I met who lived in Kathmandu and surrounding villages not only lived day to day, but almost lived meal to meal. And it was that absolute poverty that drove many of them at that time into the darker side of Nepal, with the Maoist uprising and the troubles politically they had there. And really the lesson that I learned from being in Nepal was quite clear, that when young people, and particularly children, have little hope or little education, they often have no choice. And that's something, a message that I think we have to put out loud and clear. And of course, it's not just related to poverty. Politicians across the world, and particularly sometimes in this country, use religious and racial division for their own political gains. And that's something we should all be aware of. We should all root out, and we should all challenge it, because what we do learn is when we do challenge that kind of behaviour and that kind of racial and religious hatred, that when people stand side by side we can defeat it, and we should stand side by side to make sure we defeat it. And of course, in terms of aid, the UK has always been generous, and the people of the United Kingdom always have that spirit of generosity. You only have to look at things, the fundraising events that happen in the United Kingdom, to know that genuinely ordinary people are generous towards international aid. And that's why we need to keep continuing to press the government on ensuring that they enshrine the 0.7% aid budget and legislation as they promised. So they have been fairly uncommittal on doing that at the moment. I'll perhaps finish with a more light-hearted story, just to emphasise to you how multicultural and how much in solidarity we all live these days. I was elected at 5:15 a.m. on Friday the 6th of May 2010, and my very first engagement as a Member of Parliament was on the Sunday afternoon at a small Bangladeshi restaurant in Edinburgh. And I was invited along to speak to the Bangladeshi, Indian and Pakistani communities who had all come together in an annual event to talk to me and to give their views on how communities in Edinburgh had integrated and were living together. Now, I don't know how many people in this room will know what Iron Brew is. Probably Anas is the only one. It's Scotland's national fizzy drink. It's more popular in Scotland than Coca-Cola. But just to highlight how multicultural we've got in Scotland, I stood up being announced by the chairman in front of the Bangladeshi, Indian and Pakistani communities to make a short contribution, as the chairman decided to open what was a very large bottle of Iron Brew, which shot off the ceiling and covered the whole of the top table from head to toe in orange sticky drink. Now, if Scotland hasn't moved towards a multicultural organisation, a country, I don't know when they ever will. When you're at that kind of event, you're speaking directly to all those communities that have come together, and you're standing head to toe in Iron Brew. So that's my two stories of why I'm here tonight. Thank you very much for coming along, and thank you very much for the very warm welcome. And I was delighted when I arrived to hear so many of the wonderful stories of the way in which you've got involved with this organisation, and I'm sure we'll all have a wonderful evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ian. Just a request, I will say it in Urdu to the cameraman. While people are speaking, can you take the picture from the right, please? And these people are sitting here, so the still pictures can be taken later on when the speeches are finished. ये बाद में भी तस्वीरें ली जा सकती हैं, सो कैमरामैनों से रिक्वेस्ट है कि जब कोई भी बंदा यहाँ बोल रहा हो तो आप या तस्वीर यहाँ से आके नहीं, या बाद में ये जो बैठे हैं ये लोग कहीं नहीं जा रहे, So can I now invite, as I think it has been already said, he is one of the youngest MP. He is following footsteps of my good friend, so he calls me uncle. And they have a tradition that they don't go to events together. I was trying to drag his father today from Scotland, but he has come recently from Pakistan. So he said, it is too cold, so I can't come. So even I'm thankful to everybody who's come this cold, 18th of December, which is basically 1 week before Christmas. So, and coming on time is very important, and that's why I think next year when we have we will do it in June, that people are quite hot and they can enjoy the drinks. Can I invite Deputy Leader of the Scottish Labour Party, Anna Sarwar, come and speak on supporting developing world in the age of international austerity.
Good evening, assalamu alaikum, namaste, and sat sri akal. I think you're having a slight dig at me there, Lashai Sabbath. It's important to come on time, and that's why I was late, so I apologise sincerely for doing that. I think you should all show your appreciation for Mushtaq Lashari. I still call him Councillor Lashari, who spends more time in Parliament than any Member of Parliament, who organises more events than anyone has ever had the possibility to attend. And someone who is genuinely passionate about all the things that he stands for and Third World Lord Army stands for. So please show your appreciation. Before I come to speak about Ivan and Ian, I should also say a special word for my good friend Dave Anderson. If you think you can't understand my Scottish accent, wait till you hear Dave Anderson do a speech. We don't understand what he says, but I'll translate for Ian Murray. Will translate for you for Dave. Dave was Ian's mentioned the leadership contest that I took part in this time last year. Actually, it was my first anniversary last year. It feels like a very, very long year indeed. Dave was also always a very great source of advice and support through that contest. He promised me that he would get me some trade union support. I ended up getting none, so I think that emphasises the role that Dave played in the campaign. I also want to say a special mention for my good friend Ian Murray. We once had the funny moment, the funny 24-hour during the leadership contest when Elaine Murray decided she wanted to stand for the deputy leadership, and one of the journalists in the lobby misheard and thought it was Ian Murray. So it was 24 hours, it was Sarwar versus Murray, friend versus friend, which was all very good humour indeed. I just want to say about Ian, people say, and people have said after the Scottish Parliament election result in 2011, that actually the Labour Party in Scotland was finished, had no talent, and actually was a busted flush. I think if you look at colleagues like Ian Murray, like Graham McClyman, like Tom Richards, like so many others, it shows you the future of the Scottish Labour Party is in very, very good hands indeed. I'm proud to call someone like Ian both a colleague and a friend, and someone like Ian doesn't belong in opposition, he belongs in government, and that's why it's important that we make sure we return a Labour government in the next general election. And on that very point, Ivan Lewis, someone who we've got to know very, very well, someone who's got some great humour and great wit. Actually, Ivan was sitting next to me when I was doing my maiden speech, and if you go on my website, I'm not going to plug it for you this evening, but if you go on my website, the first picture you see is a picture of me doing my maiden speech, and Ivan laughing sitting next to me. I hope he's laughing at a joke in my speech rather than the actual content of my speech, but Ivan just recently returned from Burma, and I know many constituents, I know many people here in this room have got in touch about the horrific situation facing the Rohingya community in Burma. Ivan has just returned from there where he was making representations on behalf of the Rohingya community and has come back and spoken very passionately and emotionally about the plight of the Rohingya community, and I think we have a genuine friend in terms of Ivan Lewis, the work he's doing, both in terms of his labour principles but also the work he's doing as Shadow Secretary of State for International Development, and again another person that belongs not in opposition but actually in government, delivering Labour Party values every single day. I just want to say a couple of things about Third World Solidarity, why I think it's such an important organisation, and why I think this event is so important itself. One is the times that we live in. Yes, we have austerity, yes, we have a flatlining growth, yes, we have our economy in many senses in reverse, and yes, that's going to last all the way to 2018. But actually, the things that we take for granted every single day, the fact that if our loved one gets unwell, we have a national health service that we can turn to, the fact that no matter how bad an economy gets, we know that our children will still have a school to go to on Monday morning, And the fact that no matter how much we might fall out with our loved ones, we'll still have some food on the table when we go home at night. That's something that's not available to millions of people right around the world every single day. And that's why organisations like Sarwar Solidarity and the work that they do and the campaigning that they do is so important in getting that message across. And the second point I want to make is, I know a lot of people here have a lot of interest and passion for countries that are, yes, the UK, but also countries in their mother countries, for example, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, or other areas too. All I'd say about that is, yes, we have difficulties here in the UK around democratic politics. Yes, we're not happy with the current UK coalition government, but democracy is something I think we should celebrate and promote right across the world. And that includes countries that we call democracies like Pakistan, because democracy is not just the ability to put a cross in a box once every 4 years. Democracy is also the right to access justice when you and your family or your loved ones have been wrongly done by. That's not the case in many democracies right around the world. Democracy is also the ability to access quality public services when you need them, whether it be the health service, education. That's not the case in so many places right around the world. And that's why it's incumbent on every single person in this room, those that are involved in politics, or those that take an interest in politics, to actively come together and work together to make sure that we deliver, yes, a fairer and more prosperous United Kingdom, but actually a fairer and more prosperous world too. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you very much, Sarwar. I think I want to welcome you all, but special welcome to Aina Sharifi and Alexander from Russian Council, Gary McDonough from Southside Chamber of Commerce, but a very special thank and welcome to Ahmed Mansour, Consul General of Palestine. I think you have heard that Palestine has got observer status in the United Nations. And it was my special request. Ambassador wanted to come, but he is gone somewhere else, and we are expecting Mahmoud Mashka coming and joining us later on. So I think who else will need more peace, justice, and tolerance than the Palestinian people in Gaza and Palestine. So I welcome you all, and special welcome to you and Nishra. Now I will invite my friend, comrade, and I don't know what else I can say. He has been a very strong supporter of Third World Solidarity since he has become MP in 2005. I wouldn't go if I tell his history, and I think Norma is sitting here as the former president of Norma Stephen, the former chairman of Labour Party, former president of Unison, is sitting here. I welcome you as well. But since our chairman, All Party Parliamentary Group chairman, has become MP in 2005, he joined us and we formed this All Party Parliamentary Group in the Parliament. And I think we have been written many times by the Speaker Office and Sergeant at Arms that Third World Solidarity is doing too many events. And I hope next year we do even more. And Yasser Abbas is sitting there from Anas Sarwar office. I always go and he picks me up and we go around and do a lot of events. The next event for everybody to come to is on New Year, 16th of January, and you will have similar event in House of Parliament where you will have more parliamentarians than you have here today, but we wouldn't like to have too many because then they enjoy themselves and we don't get a chance to speak to. My special thanks to Dr. Amir Majid, who is sitting on my right side. He is a doctor of law and he is blind, and Ivan, once you have finished, I would love you to speak to him because he is trying to build a hospital for blinds in his village where he was born. He has done 3 PhDs in law, and he belonged to the same district where Anas Sarwar's father came from and I come from. He is sitting on our right. He made effort to come here, although he is chairing I think, court tomorrow because he is a judge. So can I invite comrade, our chairman, who I love to call Brother Dave Anderson, to come and speak and introduce our
Good evening, everybody. Talking of squad, you're supposed to be here and enjoy yourselves. Your Excellencies, Lords, friends, comrades, ladies and gentlemen. This is a little bit like an annual general meeting, I think, so we should really say Where are we? What have we done for the last year? First thing I want to say is this sign is not complete. Because the sign that we work under in Parliament is we build freedom, justice, democracy, peace through dialogue. And that's what we try and encourage in Parliament. Whenever we have a meeting in Parliament, I always open it by saying, we're there to hear diverse views. We hear people we don't agree with, but that's the whole point of this group. We want people in one room talking about different issues from different angles. If we don't agree, let's talk about the things we don't agree about. Because if we don't do that, what else do? We start killing each other. That's the truth. And when you start killing each other, that's the failure of people like me, my colleagues who spoke so well tonight, and the colleague who will follow us on, Ivan. When politicians fail, we send young men and young women out to get killed. When there's armed democracies send their young men and their young women to go and commit what is classed as terrorism from one side or freedom fighters from the other. That's the failure of people like me, the people who take responsibility. And I think if we can enhance the potential of dialogue and getting people to come together and understand that though we might come from different parts of the world, we might be grown up in completely different ways. The truth is, we're all human beings on the skin. What do we want? A better world for our kids. A good home to live in. Go to work. Nobody, let's have a job. If somebody has a job, you're halfway resolving the problems of the world, because if you've got a job, you have social interaction, you have the chance to make some money, build a better life for yourself. And that's the things we should be looking for in life. And that's the issue more than anything else. That not just in this country, but in the world, we have to look now to try and resolve the position we're in now. And I've got to say, and this is not meant to be political, but it will be, that the attitude we face in this country by the government who's run this country at the moment is against the principle of getting people into work. It's not working. More and more people who are out in work, who can't achieve the things that will make their lives satisfactory. So it's almost worse than being out of work when you're working your socks off and you're getting nowhere. So we really do have to get together and make things better. Are things better than what they were a year ago last time we met? I'd like to say in Iraq they were, but news this morning about the illness of the President is very, very disturbing news. Hopefully things move forward, but my understanding is he's probably in an induced coma, which may be the right thing to do. There's no doubt about it, there will be a vacuum in that country, and hopefully the vacuum isn't filled by the wrong people. We see the unravelling of the Arab Spring. People will be here who were at the meetings we had last year. When I welcomed the Arab Spring, I had a word of caution. That the Arab Spring was good in the sense that ordinary people said, we don't like what's happened to us and we want to change. The problem is, what change did they get? And that has been still not resolved. Obviously the issue in Syria is a real issue for all of us, and I really do worry about the way in the last few weeks that the West has ramped up the vitriol against Syria, and I hope to God that we don't make the same mistakes we made in the last decade, because if we do, it'll be the detriment of all of us. We've had some good successes within the group in Parliament. We had very, very successful meetings with the Foreign Minister about Ethiopia. Sadly, the gentleman by the name of Henry Bellingham, who was very, very open to the approaches we made. He's being moved on in the reshuffle. We're having problems making contact, but we will keep at that. We've had contact with the Ethiopian embassy about some of the things that's going on in that part of the world, and we will keep that going. But to come back a little bit closer to where we are, there's a point that Ian Murray raised about young children being exploited. He talked about what he saw in Nepal. You've only got to look 200 miles to the northwest from here to what's happening in Belfast this week. Young boys and girls being turned the way the parents were, the grandparents were 20, 30, 40 years ago, to think that a symbol like a flag is as important as life and death. It isn't. And we've got to make the case to say, look, you need to be aware there are much, much more important things in life than that. And that comes back to what I said about us being prepared to have discussions about the reality of bringing people together through dialogue. It won't be easy, but if we give in, the option will be absolutely horrendous. It's my pleasure tonight to introduce Ivan Lewis. Ivan is the Member of Parliament for Bury South in the northwest of this country. He's been in Parliament, I believe, since 1997, Ivan. He's had a number of posts. What are the real workers? It's a strange occupation, this. If you do something wrong, everybody knows about it. If you go in the jungle for a week, more than everybody knows about it. But if you work your socks off, as Ivan does, people may not know, but the people who really count in this country know the work that Ivan's done. He was a minister in the health department, in education, in the treasury, in the foreign office, and in the Department for International Development. When we lost the election in May 2010, he became the Shadow Secretary for the Department of Culture, Media and Sport. And it was Ivan who started the campaign that flushed out reality around Rupert Murdoch. And a good friend of ours who spoke to us in this very room last year, Tom Watson, a great friend, and he'll get a lot of the accolades. But if Ivan hadn't started the work, Tom might not have been able to complete it. He's now done a tremendous job as a Shadow Secretary for Difford. And this is the first introductory side of this group, and I hope we can work together with Ivan, not just in London, but clearly he comes from a part of the world where there's a huge contingent of people from the third world, from the developing world, who've been here for a long time, who've made the roots of this country, who believe in the same things we all believe in, and I hope we can work with him together. I want to thank you all for coming. Wish you all the confidence of season, and say a very big thanks to my colleagues, Anas and Ian, who have come here tonight, and despite the fact I'm in Scotland, we will take care of them, even though you only come from the private nation. We don't mind the fact that their people get a lot more money than ours do. We don't mind. You're very, very nice that way. And thank you to Norma for coming. So, and I also say, Anna spoke very highly of Mushtaq, and who wouldn't? But also I'll speak even more highly for Mushtaq's wife, Abner, who puts up with them. Thank you very much. Well,
good evening, everybody. It's a real privilege to have the opportunity of being with you tonight. I want to talk in my speech about why it's absolutely essential, even in this age of austerity, that we make the case for development. I want to talk to you about my party's legacy on the whole question of development, points of agreement and disagreement with the current Tory-led government, but also our vision for the future of development beyond 2015, when the current Millennium Development Goals come to a conclusion. Before getting into the substance to my speech, I want to say a few words about some of the people you've heard from tonight. Dave Anderson is one of the unsung heroes of Parliament, and those of us who watch carefully and closely about the people who make a difference, the people who are passionate, the people who are authentic, and the people who never forget where they came from. Dave Anderson is a manifestation of that. By the way, he also gave one of the best analysis of what's happened over the last 12 months in terms of foreign affairs, and I've heard from even many a front bench spokesperson. Ian Murray and Anas Sarwar. Well, if anybody had any doubts about the future of the Labour Party, you need to look at Anas and Ian. They're intelligent, they have integrity, they're grounded in their communities, but they're absolutely determined to make a difference and improve the world for the better. You know, there are a lot of people in modern politics who I would describe as careerists, and I've never regarded politics as a career. Politics should be a vocation, not a career. And Anas and Ian are classic examples of people who see politics in that way, and I'm proud to call them my colleagues. Of course, they do make me feel slightly old, a bit like an elder statesman, but I am really delighted at the leadership that they're providing in terms of the new generation of the Labour Party. They will be the rising stars of our party going forward, whatever roles they end up fulfilling. Mushtaq, can I also say what a role model you are for everybody in this group? And you know, there are too many people, when they talk about identity, who ask us to make choices. Well, I actually think those choices are false. You should be able to be proud to be a Muslim, to be of Pakistani origin, equally to be a Brit and to be proud to be British. Why should anyone have to choose between those different identities? And I think that Mushtaq is somebody who has always made that very, very clear. I'm also delighted that Norma Stevenson is here tonight, a former chair of the Labour Party, a towering figure in the trade union movement, somebody who over many, many years, in the good times and in the bad times, has been a shining light for standing up for the interests of working people. We should never forget, the Labour Party was born out of the trade union movement. And in this age of austerity, when people are struggling, people are being challenged, people are having it tough, it's really important we never forget who we were elected to speak for. We were elected to speak for those hard-working, ordinary people who this government, frankly, are making life very difficult for indeed. Friends, it's been quite a year for me. I made my debut this year, not many people know this, on Have I Got News for You. Some of you know the programme on TV, Have I Got News for You? Anybody watch it?
Yes.
A few months ago, they flashed up on the screen all these members of the Shadow Cabinet. They said, these are all a bunch of people we've never heard of, completely anonymous, what a bunch of no-hopers. And then they flashed a picture of me up on the screen. And Ian Hislop said, he said, the third Miliband brother, the older one. Well, I tell you, I love both the brothers equally. I really do. But there's one thing I don't want, I need, and that's to be the third Miliband brother. That would be far too complicated. I also want to share with you a personal story, which actually, in many ways, is relevant to that banner, and it's relevant to some of the people in this room. I never knew my grandfather. He died when my mother was 3 months old. At the age of 18, he went to fight in a war a long way from home. It was called the Spanish Civil War. He was a young Glaswegian. And at the age of 18, he decided that if we didn't go to Spain, join up with the International Brigade, take on Franco, then fascism would take over Europe. He was a communist, basically, and he was derided, as they were, for taking that view. Of course, history sadly vindicated. But he survived the Spanish Civil War. He was taken prisoner by Franco in Spain at the age of 18. He survived that war, and then he went proudly to fight for Britain in the Second World War. Very tragically, he died 5 years later, at the age of 23, in 1943. He was killed by Rommel, not personally, but Rommel's troops in Tunis, North Africa. 3 weeks ago, I had the privilege, as a guest at the British Council, to go to Tunisia to talk about the Arab Spring and some of the implications of the Arab Spring. And I was absolutely determined to go and see if I could find my grandfather's grave. And he was buried in a Commonwealth War Graves cemetery. Remarkable places. These graveyards are kept around the world of people who have given their service and made the ultimate sacrifice. And I was driven an hour out of Tunis, but went to this cemetery, which was beautifully kept, incredibly green. The gravestones were white, clean as though they were new. And I was able to identify from the internet my grandfather's gravestone. I didn't know what to expect, I didn't know what I would find, and I found his gravestone. And most of the gravestones had slogans or messages from loved ones, obviously. Devastated loved ones about their relatives who, as I say, made the ultimate sacrifice. My grandfather's, though, had a political message on his gravestone. Imagine how powerful and remarkable this experience was. And it said the following: all my life and strength were given to the greatest cause in the world, the liberation of mankind. And I suddenly thought, well, isn't it odd that all of these years later, I've been given the honour by Ed Miliband of being the Labour Party spokesperson with responsibility for international development. Liberation is the right to express views freely, the right to participate in free and fair elections, the right to live your life free of discrimination on grounds of race, faith, gender and sexuality. But the greatest liberation of all is to be liberated from poverty, which destroys human potential and too often crushes human dignity and human spirit. And that's what everybody in this room is devoted to doing. I always say that social justice has no borders. If you believe in social justice in Glasgow, in Manchester, in Birmingham, in London, then you have to believe in social justice in every single part of the world. And that is the mission that we are engaged in. It's important, as David did in his opening remarks, to try and put this debate into some level of context. We live in a rapidly changing world. 75% of the world's poorest people live in middle-income countries. They no longer live in so-called poor countries. We've just experienced something we could never have predicted only a couple of years ago, the Arab Spring, and we don't know the consequences of the Arab Spring. But we've also been through a historic global financial crisis, which is creating austerity around the world. We also have many global challenges. Global challenges that can never be resolved and tackled through nation states alone, but global challenges which require global solution. Climate change, rising food prices, water and energy security, terrorism, inequality, population growth. We must accept that in the modern globalised world, we have to work together to confront global challenges. And let's be honest, these are very, very difficult times in this country. It's the longest recession since World War II. Now, it was always going to be tough. It was always going to be difficult. There were always going to be hard choices that had to be made, whoever was elected. But let's be clear, we said from day one, if the cuts are too fast and too deep, if we don't have a jobs and growth strategy, we'll go back into a double-dip recession. That is exactly what has happened. Now, that's all about statistics, but statistics don't really describe or articulate the impact on people's lives. The young people left with no hope. The parents and grandparents who are worried in a way they've never been worried for decades about the future of their kids and their grandkids. A sense that the fact that we've always taken for granted that our kids will do better than us, that's always been, I guess, everybody in this room's ambition, that your children are going to do better than you've done. There is a fear that we live in an era where that's no longer going to be possible. So the point I'm making is times are tough. They are very difficult. But even in that context, I firmly believe we have a duty, a moral duty and responsibility to make the case for international development. Not an easy case to make, it's a challenging case to make. People say, why should you spend money abroad when we've got all these challenges at home? I think we have to make the case. Now, why should we make the case? Well, firstly, I joined the Labour Party because I believe in social justice. And therefore, even in the difficult times, arguably you need to be focused on social justice more so than in the good times, when the level of inequality inevitably grows. So we have got to be prepared to look people in the eye and make the case for international development on the basis of social justice. Of course, also, it's important we make this point. Why should the poorest people in the world pay the price for the reckless, irresponsible behaviour of bankers? It was they who created this financial crisis. It started on Wall Street. Let us make no mistake about that. It contaminated then the Eurozone and spread beyond that. Why should the poorest people in the world pay for the reckless conduct of some of the most powerful? It simply wouldn't be morally right. We also, I think, have to explain to people that there is as well as there being an altruistic reason, i.e. social justice, there is also self-interest reasons. We know that where you have a lethal cocktail of fragile or poor governments, abject poverty, and extremist organisation, that leads to insecurity. That leads to a threat to our security. So it seems to me it's pretty obvious that we have a direct responsibility to tackle some of those issues. Trade. The developing countries of yesterday are our trading partners of today. And that will continue to be the case going forward. And when people talk about immigration, there is a denial of the fact that many, many people people, of course, shift across the world to flee persecution, to flee tyranny. But many people, it's human nature, they want to move for a better quality of life, a better standard of living. People wouldn't want to move in large numbers if you were able to offer them that better standard of living and better quality of life in their own countries. So we need to make the argument on a social justice basis, but also on a self-interest basis. We also have to tackle the argument that somehow aid and development work or doesn't work. You've all heard the argument that aid and development all gets wasted on corruption, that it doesn't get to the people who need it the most, that somehow it isn't making a difference. We see this in our papers day after day. We have to make the case for the fact that aid and development most definitely does work. To give some examples, in many countries, we give support to help those countries build state institutions. Now, it's all right building a hospital and a school. It's great, and lots of people are passionate about doing that, and we should support them in terms of that passion. But what every country needs is a health service, preferably free at the point of use, and also an education system. And those can only be created, developed by the state. And therefore, our role in supporting the development of state institutions is incredibly important. It's also true that in a modern development context, jobs and growth is incredibly important. And therefore, using aid and development to catalyse responsible, yes, but jobs and growth in terms of the private sector is also very, very important. If you don't have, alongside an effective state, a vibrant private sector, then you will not actually be able to see a country move forward. To give some examples of making the case for why development and aid works. According to UNICEF, between 30 and 50% of Asia's economic growth between 1965 and 1990 has been attributed to improvements in reproductive health and reduction in infant mortality and fertility rates. From 2000 to 2010, development assistance to sub-Saharan Africa increased by over £14.71 billion. During the same time, regional economic growth averaged between 4 and 7%. And Africa was home to 6 of the world's 10 fastest growing economies. It's also, of course, vital that aid and development supports civil society. Because as well as having an effective state, a dynamic private sector, it's incredibly important that you have networks that can hold government to account. And therefore, investing in civil society is really, really important. It's also true that aid supports people to access vital health services and educational opportunities which are essential to their future well-being. According to UNICEF, addressing undernutrition in pregnant women and children increases an individual's lifetime earnings by up to 10%. An estimated 600,000 new HIV infections in children have been averted. In 1995, the vast majority since 2005. 50.8 million more children started going to school in Africa between 1999 and 2010. Half of sub-Saharan African households now own an anti-malaria net, up from just 3% in 2000, reducing deaths by 33%. And as a result of immunisation supported by Gavi, 5.5 million child deaths have been averted. So don't ever buy into the argument that aid and development doesn't make a difference, that it doesn't change people's lives, that it hasn't in many cases been transformational. It has. But also don't buy into the argument that somehow this all happened by accident, that it's nothing to do with political choices, it's nothing to do with the governments that you elect. And that takes me to our legacy, because there will be people in this room who have doubts about some of the decisions that we took in government. Maybe even some of those decisions in the context of foreign policy, let's be honest. Okay? But nobody can dispute our legacy in terms of international development. We helped to lift 3 million people out of poverty every year. We tripled the aid budget. We provided global leadership to provide the funding to make the Millennium Development Goals possible. We established for the first time the Department for International Development as a cabinet level department. We untied aid from specific commercial projects. You may remember that there was a time when aid was provided in return for Britain somehow getting commercial benefit, and that led to all sorts of difficulties in relation to corruption. We made the historic target, the objective, to hit 0.7% of gross national income to be spent on overseas development assistance by 2013. We helped to get some 40 million more children into school. We improved water or sanitation services for over 1.5 million people. We assisted over 12 million people through food security programs. We distributed 70 million bed nets. We literally led the world on international development between 1997 and 2010. Why do I make the point? I make the point because, to be honest, were there that many votes in it? In some communities, maybe, but overall, perhaps not. We did it because it was absolutely the right thing morally to do. And when people are cynical and sceptical, as they have a right to be sometimes, about politics and politicians, when I look back over that period, we changed the world. I didn't come into politics to explain the world as it is, which you often hear politicians do. The reasons why we can't change things, the constraints, the limitations. I came into politics to change the world. That's why I joined the Labour Party. And I believe in the context of international development, we didn't just change Britain's spend. We actually said to the most richest and powerful countries in the world, it's time to step up to the plate. We can't go on like this. And it's something that we should be incredibly proud of. Now, I often hear people say, well, the current government are more or less doing the same as you did now. They're committed to 0.7, and therefore there is a consensus on international development, but politicians of all parties, broadly speaking, have signed up to the same agenda. Well, let me say this. First of all, I very much welcome the current government's commitment to hit 0.7 of GNI on aid and development. We should praise them for doing that. It's a good thing that they're doing, and even as an opposition politician, it's right I stand here today and make that clear. But that is not the same as saying there is a consensus on international development. So what do I mean by that? Well, international development is a lot more about than aid. I think that we need in our world big economic and social change. We don't just need growth, we need growth which is sustainable. Because otherwise we're not going to have a planet to leave our children and our grandchildren. We need a vibrant private sector, but we need companies which are both profitable and responsible. And by the way, there are many business people here, I guess, in this hall. You should never choose or have to choose between profit and ethics. It's a false choice. And I think that that is a debate that we need to have. We believe that there's a need for meaningful global agreements on fair trade and climate change. And we believe in universal free access to compulsory education and healthcare. We don't believe that people in the poorest countries, the poorest people, should be expected to pay user fees for compulsory education and access to health services, because it does deter those people from accessing those services. Now, is it for me to impose our model of a national health service in every country in the world? Of course it isn't. But I think it is for me to say, as a matter of principle, I believe that donors should get behind those leaders and those governments that are willing to offer their populations access to free universal healthcare and free access to compulsory education. There are other differences. I believe that the current government sees aid as being about charity and philanthropy. We see it, as I've said, as being about social justice and human rights. They believe still in trickle-down economics, as we've seen in terms of their management of our own economy. We believe in the inextricable link between economic prosperity and social justice. What is the point of economic prosperity and growth? It's for people to have a nice life, a decent standard of living, a good quality of life, to have aspiration and ambitions. But it's also to create a fairer world. Otherwise, what on earth is the point? That we also believe that 21% or 20% roughly of the money we spend on development is spent by the European Union. I bet people here were not necessarily aware of that. And as long as we are marginalised and have no influence in Europe, we will have very little capacity to influence that large amount of UK taxpayers' money that is spent through the European Union. Now, part of my job is, a major part of my job, is not simply to talk about the past. It's to try and map out, sketch out an exciting, progressive vision for the future of development going forward. When I walk into that office, hopefully, in 2015, it's not for me to celebrate the DFID that Labour created in 1997 and 2007. Certainly not for me to continue the policies of the current government. It's for me to have a clear vision for a new agenda for development in the context of a new world. And Miliband has spoken a lot about this being an era for big social and economic change. And the world is going to debate over the next 2 or 3 years, not necessarily mainstream yet, but everybody in this room will hopefully engage in that debate as people start to talk about it, about a new set of relationships in the world. Millennium Development Goals finish in 2015. And to be honest, the emerging economies, the Chinas, the Indias, the Brazils, the Pakistans, they're not going to tolerate the richest and powerful countries in the world telling them what the goals are going to be, nor should they. So we're going to need a new partnership between developing and middle-income countries in terms of developing and designing this new development framework. It has to be a genuine partnership, not a patronising, paternalistic set of relationships. So what do I think are some of the questions that we must answer in terms of that new framework? Well, how can we build a new global political civil society and public progressive movement for change, committed to tackling the really big issues of growing inequality, resource scarcity, climate change, trade, governance, and universal human rights? Let's be clear. You only achieve change historically if you have a coming together of political will and political leadership and public pressure. Some of you will remember Maypong history. It needs to be a combination of courageous, brave politicians who are willing to do the right thing and sometimes put aside short-term considerations for long-term interests. But alongside that, you will only get those politicians if you have the public applying pressure. How can government better support collaboration between civil society and the private sector? And something I feel very passionately about. How can we ensure the voice of UK diaspora communities and the recipients of our aid in developing countries shape and evaluate future policy? I think it's really important that we don't pay lip service to this. It seems to me that often diaspora communities in the context of UK policy are best placed to advise us on where aid and development is working and where it isn't. To advise us about issues that are challenging and controversial, like corruption, for example. But we really need to take, and I promise you on my watch, we will take diaspora communities far more seriously in terms of the development of our aid policies. But the other thing that I'm very conscious of, we don't listen to the people who are meant to receive our help, the poorest people in those countries, in terms of are we being effective? Is the help getting to them? Are we really making a difference to their lives? So I think we also have to think about new mechanisms to ensure their voice is heard. How can we use Britain's distinct place in the world to forge an alliance which brings together the United States, the European Union, and the emerging powers? I talked earlier about a list of countries which are emerging powers. The world has changed. How can we try and identify common interests where there are suspicions, there's mistrust, there's long history, there's baggage? How can we create a common agenda which brings together those different sections of the world to a shared purpose? Also, how can we break down some of the silos that get in the way in government of making development work? So, for example, obviously, it's DEC which is responsible for climate change. It's DEFRA which is responsible for food security issues. So the Treasury is responsible for tax justice issues. So how do we have a more joined up approach? And how also can the Labour Party be absolutely clear about standing for value for money? You know, it's not just about saying we want to get to 0.7, it's making sure we get the best value for every single penny of taxpayers' money. It's making sure that we're serious when we talk about tackling corruption, rather than producing lots of these glossy strategies which say we're going to deal with corruption, but actually not making any difference. How do we say to people, of course we are passionate about social justice, but being passionate about social justice is also about getting best value for money. And how do we build a new economy with responsible capitalism at its heart, where we have profitable companies? Profit is not a dirty word, but we also have ethical companies that treat their workforce properly. We have decent labour and decent labour standards in terms of the development of the private sector. So I'm going to bring my remarks to a close with just a few observations. First of all, I've just come back, as was said, from Burma. And I raised during my visit in Burma the terrible violence and persecution that is being waged against the Rohingya Muslim community in that country. And I have to say to you, I was shocked by the level of violence that I learned and heard about. I was also shocked, frankly, by the fact that it seemed to me that there were too many people who were willing either to turn a blind eye to it or almost, in some cases, to legitimise it. And we have to stand up and be counted in terms of what is happening to that Muslim community in Burma. But also, by the way, we have to be stand up and counted when it comes to Islamophobia. Because what I found in my discussions in Burma was it wasn't just about the Rohingya community who are denied citizenship rights. By the way, many of those people, of course, some of them are originally from Bangladesh. And we can have a debate about which of those people should have a right to citizenship and which of them are, if you like, immigrants. And there's a debate about that. But there are also many members of the Rohingya community whose families have been there for generations and are clearly entitled to citizenship rights. And it's purely a question of discrimination. So it's very important the international community applies pressure to the regime in Burma to make it clear that that continued discrimination is completely unacceptable in the context of a discussion about a country which is meant to be moving forward and reforming. But as I say, it's not just about the Rohingya community, in my view, in Burma. There is an Islamophobia which worries me. I think we have to be more open about and upfront about, and we ought to tackle it. I also wanted to talk about Israel-Palestine. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I'm a British Jew, and I am as frustrated as people in this room about the lack of progress towards a two-state solution. It is depressing. What we all want is a viable state for the Palestinian people, self-determination, a viable state, and security for the state of Israel. Two countries living side by side, respecting each other, working together, building economic relationships. We all desperately want to see that happen. And it will not happen unless we have a political process. And it seems to me it is absolutely essential that the newly elected President Obama takes responsibility, working with the EU and others, to insist that all parties get round the table and resolve all of the outstanding issues. We all know what the outstanding issues are. We've known what the outstanding issues are for a very, very long time. So I feel passionately that you can be for a Palestinian state and for Israel's right to exist free of aggression and in a secure way. You should not, again, have to choose between those two positions. And too often there's a polarisation that really disturbs me, even in the House of Commons, where you either for one or you for the other. Actually, what we need is to build an alliance of people who understand, actually, these two states ultimately are interdependent and these two people should be interdependent. Now, I know those are fine words. I was the Minister to the Middle East for 12 months, and it was not easy to be the Minister to the Middle East for 12 months. But believe me, there is absolutely no reason in our lifetime why there cannot be a two-state solution. And when people say to me, there can't be, I say to them this: when I was a kid growing up, which wasn't that long ago, probably a lot longer than I want to imagine, if people would have said to me that the Berlin Wall would come down and the Soviet Empire would crumble, I would have laughed at them. If people would have said Mandela would be released from prison and become president of South Africa, democratically elected, apartheid dismantled, I would have laughed at them. If people would have said that Martin McGuinness and Ian Paisley would serve in an Irish government in Northern Ireland, we would have laughed at them. If people would have said an African American would be elected President of the United States, we would have laughed at them. Why on earth can't we believe in a two-state solution between the Israelis and the Palestinians? And everybody in this room we need to devote ourselves to that cause. It's difficult, it's tough, it's challenging. There are historic wrongs and rights and debates about who was right and who was wrong. That isn't going to get us anywhere. We need to be clear about the future. And there is no doubt there will not be stability in that part of the world until we have a just and fair two-state solution. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very, very much for giving me the opportunity of speaking to you this evening. This group is an inspiration to those of us who care passionately about international development. Even in this age of austerity, especially in this age of austerity, it's never been more important to make the case for social justice. And always remember that social justice has no borders, only new frontiers. Thank you very much.
Shah Sahab and everybody, I'm going to say it, Sahab, while you are sitting with your head down, stand up and be counted. Yes, everybody. And I think the friends who have supported this evening, I'm very thankful. Tahir Sahab, there are a lot of glasses empty here, so can you ask them to fill the glasses? And everybody and anybody who is ready to eat, you are there to eat. There is food ready as well. Yeah. And I've got some more bottles here, so anybody who is on special diet, I've got bottles for them as well. So good evening. I know there are some photographers who came late. Unless I'm sorry about it, but I think meanwhile your glasses will be filled. Abda, I think Abda's name came up here, so I think she is equally partner to this. Sorry. Come in, Anna. You stand in the middle. Thank you. Normal, you can leave your bag there, nobody will pick up. Abda, bring her with you. Yes, take it out. It is not needed. Just stand in there.
I don't care.
Please.
Doing same time.
That's right, yes.
That's
right, yes,
That was the meeting received.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Sorry. I think now we can go.
Yeah, sure.